You're terminated, effective immediately. I'm giving your position to my golf buddy, Trevor. Frankly, you're too emotional for leadership." I stared at the text message glowing on my phone screen, the words blurring as thousands of screaming fans sang along around me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, sitting in the VIP section at Taylor Swift's Eras Tour in Atlanta, Georgia, when my career just exploded in my hands. My name is Danielle Russo, and I'm 34 years old. Or rather, I was the director of public relations at Suncaster Bioworks until approximately 30 seconds ago. For the past decade, I had built their communications department from absolutely nothing into an award-winning operation that managed some of the most high-profile pharmaceutical campaigns in the Southeast. I glanced to my left, where Patricia Henderson, a member of Suncaster's board of directors, was swaying to the music, completely oblivious to the nuclear bomb that had just detonated in my professional life. She had invited me tonight as a thank you for the flawless product launch I had orchestrated 3 months ago, the one that brought in $42 million in pre-orders and landed us on the cover of 3 industry magazines. The stadium lights pulsed in rhythm with the beat, but all I could see was the smug face of my boss, Director of Operations Gregory Walsh. He had been gunning for me ever since I refused to approve his ridiculous proposal to sponsor his country club's golf tournament with company funds. Apparently, integrity made me difficult to work with. Patricia leaned over, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Isn't this incredible? I can't believe you got us these seats." I forced a smile, my mind racing. "Actually, Patricia, I have something interesting to show you." I angled my phone toward her, watching her expression change as she read Gregory's message. Her face went from confusion to shock to absolute fury in the span of 5 seconds. "He fired you? Tonight? During this?" She gestured toward the spectacular stage production around us. "Apparently so." I kept my voice steady, though inside I was calculating the catastrophic damage this would cause. 3 major clients had specifically requested to work only with me. 2 product launches were scheduled for next month under my direct supervision. And Gregory wanted to hand it all over to Trevor Morrison, a guy whose biggest professional achievement was organizing a charity golf tournament that raised $12,000. The music swelled around us, but Patricia was no longer paying attention to the show. She was scrolling through my phone, reading the message again, her face growing darker with each word. I could practically see the gears turning in her head as she processed the implications of Gregory's impulsive decision. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. Gregory Walsh had always resented that I reported directly to the CEO while he had to work his way up through traditional channels. When I was hired 10 years ago, Suncaster Bioworks was a small research company with brilliant scientists but zero media presence. They brought me in straight from graduate school with a degree in communications and a hunger to prove myself. I built everything from scratch: the press protocols, the client relationship systems, the crisis management procedures that saved the company millions during the contamination scare 2 years ago. I had personally cultivated relationships with journalists, regulatory officials, and industry leaders who trusted me implicitly. My client retention rate was 96%, and my campaigns consistently exceeded engagement targets by at least 30%. But Gregory saw my success differently. To him, I was the upstart who bypassed the traditional hierarchy. He made it clear during every interaction that he considered my position unnecessary, a fancy title for what he called writing press releases and schmoozing reporters. Never mind that those press releases had generated over $200 million in positive coverage value, or that my schmoozing had prevented 3 potential scandals from ever reaching the media. The tension escalated 6 months ago when Gregory started pushing Trevor Morrison, his golf partner and former college roommate, for a position in my department. Trevor had a business degree and exactly 0 experience in pharmaceutical communications. His previous job was managing social media for a local restaurant chain, where his biggest crisis involved a negative Yelp review about cold French fries. Trevor brings fresh perspective, Gregory had argued during our last departmental meeting. Sometimes experience can make people rigid in their thinking. I knew what he was really saying. Trevor would be malleable, grateful, and most importantly, loyal to Gregory, instead of the company's actual interests. When I politely declined to create a position for someone so unqualified, Gregory's attitude toward me shifted from professional indifference to active hostility. He started excluding me from key meetings, questioning my budget requests, and undermining my authority with junior staff members. Last month, he suggested to CEO Robert Chen that my department could be streamlined for efficiency, corporate speak for cutting my position and distributing my responsibilities among people who would report to him. Patricia had witnessed some of these power plays during board meetings, which probably explained why she looked ready to commit murder right now. She understood exactly what Gregory was attempting: a hostile takeover of the department I had built through a decade of 18-hour days and sleepless nights managing crises. The crowd around us erupted as the opening notes of another song began, but the celebration felt hollow now. Everything I had worked for was crumbling, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The worst part was realizing how perfectly Gregory had timed this. Friday night, during a concert, when the executive offices were empty, and I couldn't immediately respond or defend myself. By Monday morning, Trevor would already be sitting in my office, fielding calls from my clients, making decisions about campaigns I had spent months developing. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Human Resources with the subject line, "Immediate termination. Action required." The message was professionally cold, outlining the return of company property, final paycheck details, and a reminder about my non-disclosure agreement. No mention of my 10 years of service, the awards I had won for the company, or the relationships I had built that were worth millions in business value. I scrolled down to see that Gregory had already sent an announcement to the entire company. Effective immediately, Trevor Morrison will be assuming leadership of the Public Relations Department. Please join me in welcoming Trevor to his new role and thanking Danielle for her service. Thanking me for my service, like I was a departing intern instead of the person who had single-handedly elevated Suncaster's industry reputation from unknown startup to pharmaceutical powerhouse. The dismissive tone made my blood pressure spike, but I forced myself to remain calm. Patricia was watching me carefully, and I needed to handle this with the professionalism that Gregory clearly lacked. "Danielle, this is completely unacceptable," Patricia said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "The board wasn't consulted about this decision. Gregory doesn't have the authority to terminate department heads without approval." I nodded, though I wasn't entirely surprised that Gregory had overstepped his boundaries. He had been acting increasingly autonomous lately, making decisions that should have required board oversight. The golf tournament sponsorship he had pushed so aggressively was just one example of his tendency to prioritize personal interests over company policy. "What's really concerning," I said carefully, "is that 3 of our biggest clients specifically contracted to work with me personally. The Hernandez Pharmaceutical account, the Morrison Medical Partnership, and the entire Westbrook research campaign all have clauses requiring my direct involvement." Patricia's eyes widened as the full implications hit her. "Those accounts represent what, 40% of our annual revenue? Closer to 55% when you factor in the renewal contracts scheduled for next quarter." I showed her my phone again, this time opening my email app. "I'm already getting messages from client contacts asking if the rumors about personnel changes are true." The concert continued around us, but I could see Patricia's mind working through the crisis Gregory had just created. Firing me wasn't just a personnel decision. It was potentially a company-ending catastrophe. Without my established relationships and institutional knowledge, those clients could walk away, taking their multi-million-dollar contracts with them. "We need to call an emergency board meeting," Patricia said, pulling out her own phone. "This situation requires immediate intervention before it destroys everything you've built." Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking my phone, watching as client after client reached out with increasingly urgent questions. The rumors were spreading faster than I had anticipated, and Gregory's hasty announcement had created exactly the kind of uncertainty that made corporate partners nervous. At 6 a.m., I received a call from Janet Hernandez, CEO of Hernandez Pharmaceuticals and my biggest client. Danielle, I need to know what's happening. My assistant says someone named Trevor Morrison called claiming to be taking over our account. I chose my words carefully, knowing that one wrong statement could trigger a contractual review. There have been some internal changes at Suncaster, Janet. I'm not currently in a position to discuss specifics, but I wanted you to hear from me directly that your account's continuity is my primary concern. Danielle, you know I trust you completely, but my contract is with you personally. If you're not managing our campaign, we need to reassess our partnership immediately. By 8 a.m., I had received similar calls from Morrison Medical and Westbrook Research. Each conversation followed the same pattern: initial confusion, growing concern, and finally, thinly veiled threats to terminate their contracts if I wasn't involved. I documented every conversation, knowing that Patricia would need this information for the emergency board meeting she had scheduled for Monday morning. Trevor Morrison, meanwhile, seemed blissfully unaware of the crisis he was inheriting. According to my former assistant Kelly, who texted me updates throughout the weekend, Trevor had spent Saturday afternoon measuring my office for new furniture and asking IT to change all the department passwords. He had also scheduled a meet and greet with the junior staff for Monday morning, apparently planning to introduce himself as their new leader. Gregory's confidence was almost impressive in its stupidity. He had genuinely believed that firing me would solve his territorial disputes without considering the practical consequences. In his mind, public relations was just glorified marketing, something any competent business graduate could handle with minimal transition time. I spent Sunday afternoon preparing a comprehensive handover document, not out of obligation, but as protection for myself and the junior staff who didn't deserve to suffer for Gregory's vendetta. The document outlined every active campaign, client preference, ongoing crisis management protocol, and scheduled deliverable for the next 6 months. It was 47 pages of detailed institutional knowledge that Trevor would never be able to replicate. But the document also served another purpose. It demonstrated exactly how much Gregory didn't understand about my role. Every page highlighted relationships, expertise, and ongoing commitments that couldn't simply be transferred to an inexperienced replacement. When the board reviewed it, they would see immediately that Gregory had essentially dynamited the foundation of a department that generated 60% of Suncaster's positive media coverage. Monday morning arrived with a text from Patricia. Emergency board meeting at 9 a.m. Come prepared to present your side. This is far from over. I dressed carefully in my best navy suit, the one I wore for high-stakes client presentations. If I was going to fight for my career, I wanted to look like the consummate professional Gregory claimed I wasn't. I arrived at Suncaster's headquarters 30 minutes early, using my still active building access to retrieve files from my office before Trevor arrived. The sight of my workspace was jarring. My industry awards had been packed into boxes, my client photos removed from the walls, and my personalized coffee mug replaced with a generic Suncaster tumbler. Trevor had already started making the space his own, which felt like a violation of something sacred. At 8:45 a.m., I positioned myself in the conference room adjacent to the boardroom, reviewing my notes one final time. Whatever happened in the next hour would determine whether Gregory's impulsive power grab succeeded or whether justice would finally catch up with his reckless ambition. The emergency board meeting began with Patricia Henderson placing my termination text message on the conference table like evidence in a murder trial. The 7 board members read it in silence, their expressions ranging from confusion to outrage as the implications became clear. Gregory fired our director of public relations via text message, Patricia announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 20 years building corporate empires. During a concert, without board consultation, and he plans to replace her with someone whose qualifications include managing a restaurant's social media account. Gregory Walsh sat at the far end of the table, his usual confidence visibly shaken. He had clearly expected this to be a routine personnel announcement, not a tribunal examining his decision-making competence. Beside him, CEO Robert Chen looked like he was developing a migraine in real time. I made a strategic decision based on departmental efficiency. Gregory began, but Patricia cut him off immediately. Efficiency? Let me share some efficiency metrics with you. She opened a folder containing the documents I had prepared. Danielle Russo generated $234 million in positive media coverage value last year. Her client retention rate was 96%. She prevented 3 potential crises from becoming public scandals, saving us an estimated $50 million in damage control costs. Board member Thomas Wright leaned forward. What are Trevor Morrison's qualifications? Gregory's face flushed. Trevor brings fresh perspective and strategic thinking to... Answer the question, Wright interrupted. What is his experience in pharmaceutical communications? He has a business degree and strong communication skills. That's not what I asked. The room fell silent as Gregory struggled to articulate Trevor's non-existent qualifications. Finally, he admitted, Trevor doesn't have direct pharmaceutical experience, but he's eager to learn and brings valuable outside perspective. Patricia smiled coldly. Outside perspective. Is that what you call it when 3 of our biggest clients are threatening to terminate their contracts because they specifically contracted to work with Danielle personally? This was news to Gregory, and his face went pale. What clients? Hernandez Pharmaceuticals, Morrison Medical, and Westbrook Research, I said, speaking for the first time. Combined annual contract value of $37 million, with renewal options worth an additional $42 million over the next 3 years. Robert Chen finally found his voice. Gregory, please tell me you reviewed the contractual obligations before making this decision. The silence that followed was deafening. Gregory clearly had no idea that my client relationships were legally protected through specific performance clauses. He had assumed that firing me would automatically transfer all client relationships to Trevor, like changing the name on a business card. Board member Sarah Kim pulled out her phone. I'm getting calls from industry contacts asking if Suncaster is facing financial difficulties. Apparently, word is spreading that we've made sudden leadership changes in critical departments. The pharmaceutical industry is incredibly relationship-driven, I explained. Trust takes years to build and can be destroyed overnight. My clients don't just work with Suncaster. They work with me specifically because they trust my judgment, my expertise, and my track record of protecting their interests. Patricia nodded. Which brings us to the real question. Gregory, did you fire Danielle because of performance issues or because she refused to approve your golf tournament sponsorship proposal? Gregory's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The golf tournament proposal had been thoroughly documented in board minutes, including my professional recommendation against using company funds for Gregory's personal networking events. I think, Robert Chen said slowly, we need to discuss damage control immediately. The question isn't whether Gregory made a mistake. It's whether we can fix it before our stock price reflects these client defections. Robert Chen stood at the head of the conference table, his face grave as he addressed the board. Ladies and gentlemen, we're facing a crisis entirely of our own making. Gregory's decision has put our most valuable client relationships at risk and potentially violated contractual obligations worth tens of millions of dollars. Gregory made one last desperate attempt to defend his actions. I maintain that this was a necessary restructuring decision. Danielle was resistant to new ideas and difficult to work with when implementing strategic changes. Stop. Patricia's voice cut through the room like a blade. Let's address this resistance to new ideas. Danielle, please tell the board about Gregory's most recent strategic suggestion. I opened my portfolio and pulled out the proposal Gregory had submitted 3 weeks earlier. Gregory requested approval for Suncaster to sponsor his country club's annual golf tournament at a cost of $75,000. His justification was that it would provide networking opportunities with potential clients. And your professional assessment? Robert asked. I recommended against it for several reasons. First, the demographic attending Gregory's country club doesn't align with our target market. We're a pharmaceutical research company, not a luxury consumer brand. Second, $75,000 represents approximately 15% of my entire annual marketing budget, which would require cutting other proven initiatives. Third, the optics of spending that much on a golf tournament while we're asking employees to accept smaller raises due to budget constraints seemed problematic. Thomas Wright nodded approvingly. That sounds like exactly the kind of strategic thinking we pay her to provide. Gregory's face reddened. She consistently undermines management decisions and questions authority. She questioned spending company money on your personal hobby, Patricia interrupted. That's called doing her job. Sarah Kim looked up from her phone with alarming news. I'm getting reports that Hernandez Pharmaceuticals just issued a statement saying they're reviewing their partnership options with Suncaster. Their stock price has already dropped 3% on speculation about their pipeline disruptions. The room erupted in urgent whispers as board members processed the immediate financial implications. Hernandez Pharmaceuticals represented Suncaster's largest single account, and any disruption to their partnership would devastate quarterly earnings. Robert Chen slumped in his chair. How long do we have before this becomes a public relations nightmare? It already is, I said quietly. Industry publications monitor partnership announcements closely. By tomorrow morning, every pharmaceutical communications firm in the Southeast will know that Suncaster made sudden leadership changes in their PR department. Our competitors will use this instability to approach our clients with retention offers. The gravity of the situation finally seemed to penetrate Gregory's delusions of competence. Maybe we can offer Trevor some additional training. Training? Wright laughed bitterly. Gregory, Danielle has 10 years of specialized expertise and established relationships that took decades to build. You can't create that with a weekend seminar. Patricia leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. Gregory, you're going to personally call Trevor Morrison and explain that there's been a change in plans. Then you're going to draft a company-wide retraction of your premature announcement. But I already promised him the position. Then you'll explain that you made a promise you didn't have the authority to keep, Robert said firmly. This board has ultimate authority over department head appointments, and we're exercising that authority now. The room fell silent as the reality of Gregory's situation became clear. He had overplayed his hand spectacularly, turning what should have been a routine power struggle into a company-threatening crisis. Danielle, Patricia said, turning to me with a slight smile. I believe we have some offer negotiations to discuss. Tuesday morning, I walked back into Suncaster Bioworks with a spring in my step and a significantly improved employment contract in my briefcase. The emergency board meeting had concluded with Gregory's immediate suspension pending review, Trevor Morrison's hasty dismissal before he could cause further damage, and my reinstatement with a 20% salary increase plus equity compensation. But my real victory wasn't financial. It was professional vindication. The first person I encountered was Kelly, my former assistant, who was practically bouncing with excitement. Danielle, everyone's been asking when you'd be back. Trevor lasted exactly 36 hours before he accidentally deleted the master client contact database. I couldn't help but smile. Accidentally. He was trying to streamline the system and somehow managed to corrupt 3 years' worth of meticulously organized contact information. IT spent all of yesterday recreating it from backup files. As I walked through the department I had built from nothing, junior staff members approached with expressions of relief and barely contained joy. The past 4 days had shown them exactly what my institutional knowledge and leadership were worth. Without my guidance, they had struggled with basic client communications and nearly missed 2 critical campaign deadlines. My office had been hastily restored to its original configuration, though I noticed Gregory's personal items were conspicuously absent from the adjacent director's suite. Patricia had mentioned during our contract negotiations that Gregory's future with the company was under evaluation, which was corporate speak for updating his resume. I spent the morning fielding calls from clients who were relieved to hear directly from me that the personnel transition had been resolved. Janet Hernandez was particularly blunt. Danielle, that Trevor person called me 3 times yesterday asking basic questions about our product pipeline. It was like explaining quantum physics to a golden retriever. By noon, word had spread throughout the pharmaceutical industry that Suncaster had restructured its recent organizational changes. Stock price recovered, client confidence stabilized, and normal operations resumed. The true extent of Gregory's downfall became clear over the following weeks. The board's investigation revealed a pattern of questionable decisions and ethical lapses that extended far beyond my termination. His expense reports showed numerous business dinners at his country club with people who had no apparent connection to Suncaster. He had also been pressuring vendors to sponsor his personal golf events in exchange for favorable contract considerations. Most damaging was the discovery that Gregory had promised Trevor Morrison my position 3 months before firing me, complete with a written agreement outlining salary and benefits. This proved premeditation and demonstrated that my termination was retaliatory rather than performance-based. Patricia called me into her office on a Friday afternoon with an update. Gregory submitted his resignation yesterday. He's accepted a position with a small consulting firm in Tampa, Florida, significant step down from director level at a major pharmaceutical company. I felt a complex mix of satisfaction and professional disappointment. Gregory's vindictive behavior had created unnecessary chaos, but I took no pleasure in anyone's career destruction. Trevor Morrison has also found new employment, Patricia continued with barely concealed amusement. He's managing social media for a chain of pizza restaurants. Apparently, he decided pharmaceutical communications was too complicated for his skill set. The irony was perfect. Trevor had returned to exactly the type of role he was actually qualified for, while Gregory discovered that burning bridges in a specialized industry severely limited future opportunities. My real revenge wasn't orchestrating their downfall. It was simply excelling at my job while they demonstrated their incompetence. The contrast spoke for itself. That afternoon, I received a handwritten note from Robert Chen. Danielle, your professionalism during this crisis reminded everyone why strong leadership matters. Thank you for handling an impossible situation with grace. Sometimes the best revenge is just being excellent, while your enemies destroy themselves through their own poor choices. As I looked toward the future, I realized that surviving Gregory's betrayal had actually strengthened my position within the company and industry. The board's confidence in my abilities was now unshakable. My client relationships had been tested and proven unbreakable, and my reputation for handling crises with integrity was stronger than ever. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply watching your enemy's own actions prove exactly why they never deserved the power they tried to steal from you.